At 6:42 on a Saturday evening in October, my daughter-in-law took my plate off the dining room table, carried it through the swinging door, and set it down on a folding stool in the laundry room next to the dryer. Then she came back, put 20 coats in my arms, and said, "Since you're already up." I stood there holding those coats until my son came in behind me, looked at the stool, looked at me, and said, "Either you apologize to Sloan and finish serving, or you're out of this house by morning." I smiled, set the coats down on the washing machine, and walked out the side door to the truck that was already idling at the curb. 9 days later, my phone showed 41 missed calls. Before I take you any further into this, I want to say thank you for being here with me tonight. Tell me in the comments what city and what state you're watching from. I read every one of them, and it means more to an old man than you'd think. A quick note, friend. This story contains fictional elements shaped for storytelling and reflection. Any resemblance to real names or places is coincidental. But the lesson inside it is real, and I'd carry it with you if I were you. My name is Walter Prescott. I'm 74 years old. For 41 years, I ran refrigerated freight out of Charleston, South Carolina, and for most of that time, my son believed his father drove a truck. He wasn't wrong, exactly. I did drive. I drove nights through the Carolinas with a load of frozen shrimp and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold by Florence. What he never understood was what happened in the daylight hours while he was at school. The house on Trad Street had belonged to my wife's family since 1926. Rosalind and I raised Marcus in it. Roz was a school nurse for 32 years, and she had a way of taking the temperature of a room the second she walked into it. When she died, 4 years ago in March, the house went quiet in a way I did not know a house could go quiet. I ate dinner alone for 11 months. I counted them, and at the end of those 11 months, I made a decision that I want you to understand clearly, because I've had a lot of time to sit with it since, and I don't want you thinking I was a fool. I sold that house to my son for a third of what it was worth. Not because I was confused, not because I didn't know what I had. I sold it to him for a third because I wanted somebody in the kitchen in the morning. The only condition I wrote into the agreement was that I keep the back bedroom off the porch, the one with the window facing the alley and the crepe myrtle rose planted the year Marcus was born. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. I remember thinking, walking out of the attorney's office into that wet Charleston heat, that I had just bought myself the sound of another person moving around a house. That seemed to me, at 70 years old, like the best money I would ever spend. For the first year, it was all right. Marcus was 35 then, and he'd just gotten his own orthodontics practice up on Rutledge Avenue. He'd come home tired, and we'd sit on the porch, and he'd tell me about the day. Then he married Sloan, and Sloan had opinions about the house. She was 31, sharp as a new blade, and she ran a wedding and event business that photographed beautifully. That's the phrase she used about most things. Does it photograph? The crepe myrtle didn't photograph, so it came out in the spring. Roz's kitchen curtains didn't photograph, so they went in a bag for goodwill while I was at the eye doctor. I didn't say anything about the curtains. That was my first mistake. And it wasn't the last one. And I want to be honest with you about that as we go, because there is a version of this story where I come out looking like a wronged saint, and that version would be a lie. By the second year, I had a schedule, not one I made. It was printed on cardstock and laminated and stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a lemon. House contribution schedule. Monday, trash and recycling. Tuesday, floors. Wednesday, Sloan's dry cleaning, and I want you to notice that it said Sloan's, not ours. Thursday, the yard. Friday, the cars. My name was in every single row. I did it. That's the part that's hard to say out loud. For 2 years and 7 months, I did every line on that card, and I paid the property taxes on the house I no longer owned, and I paid the water bill because it came addressed to me from before, and nobody ever changed it, and nobody ever asked why it stopped showing up in their mail. That's the thing about being useful in a house. Nobody investigates a person who is useful. They only investigate a person who stops. Which brings me to the birthday. Marcus turned 40 on the 11th of October. Sloan planned it the way she planned everything, which is to say beautifully and with a photographer. 20 guests, rented chairs, little cards with everyone's name in gold ink at every seat. She'd hired a videographer, a young man named Dev, to shoot the whole evening for what she called her portfolio reel, because in her business, the line between a party and an advertisement had stopped existing a long time ago. I spent that Saturday on the yard and the cars, per the card. At 5 o'clock, I put on my good jacket, the gray one Roz picked out in 1998, and I went to the front to park guests as they came. That was not on the schedule. I just did it, because it was my son's 40th, and I wanted to be doing something with my hands. I came in at 20 of 7 with the smell of somebody's transmission fluid on my fingers, and I went to wash up, and then I went to the dining room to find my seat. There wasn't one. 20 chairs, 20 gold cards. I walked the whole length of that table twice, like a man looking for his glasses when they're on his head. Roz's mother's table. The one I refinished myself in 2003 after a hurricane put water in the dining room. I know the grain of that table the way I know the back of my own hand, and there was no card on it with my name. Sloane came through with a tray of something. She saw me standing there. She did not slow down. "You're in the laundry room, Walt." There wasn't a seat. It's easier back there anyway with the trays. The laundry room. There was a folding stool by the dryer with my plate on it, a paper napkin folded under the fork, and somebody had put a little glass of sweet tea on the shelf above the detergent so it wouldn't spill. I want you to know something. I have eaten in worse places. I have eaten off the hood of a Peterbilt at 3 in the morning in a sleet storm outside Roanoke and been perfectly content. It wasn't the room. It was the gold card. 20 of them, in her handwriting, and mine was the one she didn't write. I stood there a minute. Then I went back out to help, because that's who I am, and Sloane loaded my arms with the guests' coats and said, "Since you're already up." And that's when my son came through the swinging door. Marcus is not a cruel man. I need you to hear me say that, because I've had a year to think about it, and cruelty is not the diagnosis. He's a man who cannot stand to be embarrassed. And standing in that doorway with his 40-year-old face and his good shirt, he was embarrassed. Not by the stool. By me, standing there holding the coats, not moving, in front of a room full of people who could hear through the door. Dad. Quiet. Pleasant. The way a razor is pleasant right before you understand what it's done. Sloane asked you to do something. She did. Then why are you making this a thing? I'm not making anything, son. I'm standing in a laundry room. His jaw set. He came close enough that I could smell his cologne over the detergent. And he said, in a low voice, the sentence I have replayed more times than any other sentence in my life. Either you apologize to Sloane and finish serving, or you're out of this house by morning. The washing machine ticked as it cooled. Out in the dining room, somebody laughed at something. Now here's what he didn't see. 2 minutes before that, standing over that folding stool, I had taken my phone out of my jacket and sent 3 words to a man named Benny Alvarez, who had been my yard foreman for 22 years, and who still, at 66, gets to work before the birds do. The message said, "Front gate, 20 minutes. I'd like to tell you I sent it out of wisdom. I sent it because I could not think of one other thing to do with my hands. I set the coats down on the washing machine. I looked at my son, and I did not look at him with hate. I looked at him the way you look at a photograph of a place that has been torn down. 'All right, Marcus,' I said, and I smiled. I don't know why I smiled. I've thought about it. I think it was relief. Something I'd been holding for 2 years and 7 months set itself down. I walked out the side door past the recycling bins I had put out that morning. Benny's truck was at the curb with the parking lights on. He got out and opened the passenger door and did not ask me one single question, which is why he has been my friend for 22 years. "The Sawyer," I said. "That's the old rice warehouse. Down on East Bay they turned into a hotel. Brick walls, 2 feet thick, iron in the windows. I've always liked staying in a building that used to hold something heavy." Benny pulled away, and I watched that house get small in the side mirror. The lights in the dining room, the catering van, the place where the crepe myrtle used to be. I did not have my suitcase with me. I want to be truthful about that too. I'd packed it though. It was under the bed in the back room, packed 6 days earlier. 3 shirts and my medicines, and Roz's photograph in the leather frame, because a man knows when a thing is ending the way he knows when weather is coming. But I walked out with nothing but the jacket, and I've decided that's better. The suitcase was insurance. Walking out with nothing was a decision. At the hotel, I sat on the end of the bed and called Ruth Okonkwo. Ruth has been my attorney for 31 years. She was 28 and 3 months into her own practice when I hired her because every other firm in Charleston in 1994 wanted to talk to me about my little trucking outfit, and Ruth wanted to talk to me about my balance sheet. She picked up on the second ring. Walter, it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday. I'm at the Sawyer, I said. I've left Trad Street. There was a pause on her end. Not a surprised one, a settling one. You want to move on Prescott cold, or you want to wait? I want you to pull the file on the Rutledge Avenue building, I said. Marcus's lease is up for renewal on the 1st of December, isn't it? It is. Don't do anything to it. Don't touch it. Just make sure the renewal notice goes out from the LLC on schedule, the way it's gone out every 3 years, in the ordinary course of business. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Walter, he's going to read the ownership disclosure on that renewal. I know. He's never read it before. He's never had a reason to look, I said. He will now. Here is what my son did not know, and I want to lay it out plainly for you, friend, because everything that follows turns on it. In 1988, I stopped hauling other people's cold freight and started owning the places it sat. I bought a refrigerated warehouse off Meeting Street Road out of a bankruptcy for $11,000 down. Then another. By 1999, I had 4, and then I had the ground under them, and then I had a strip of commercial property on Rutledge Avenue that everybody told me was a mistake because nobody would ever build medical up that far. In 2011, I put a medical park on it and leased Suite 200 to a young orthodontist. In 2019, that suite came open again, and a different young orthodontist, my son, signed a lease with Prescott Cold Holdings, LLC, an entity managed by Okonkwo and Associates, and he never once asked who was behind the name because the rent was fair and the roof never leaked. For 6 years, my son paid rent to his father, every month, on time, and did not know it. And 2 blocks over, on Ashley River Road, the event venue where Sloan held 40% of her weddings sat on a ground lease that ran through the same LLC. I did not plan any of that. That's important. I didn't buy that land to trap my children. I bought it in 1997 because it was cheap and it was near a hospital, and I had a hunch. Life does not arrange these things on purpose. It just leaves them lying around. And then one October, a woman puts your plate on a folding stool, and suddenly all the furniture in your life is pointing the same direction. The renewal notice went out on Monday the 13th. Ruth called me Tuesday at 4:15. He called the office, she said. Asked to speak to the managing member of Prescott Cold Holdings. Told my paralegal there was an error on the ownership disclosure. What did she tell him? That there was no error and that the managing member's contact information is a matter of public record with the Secretary of State. Ruth let that sit. He hung up. Then he called back 11 minutes later and asked her to say it again. I stood at the window of that hotel room and looked down at East Bay Street, the traffic, the pluff mud smell coming up off the harbor at low tide. 2 women walked by with grocery bags. An ordinary Tuesday for everybody but 2 men in the same family. Ruth. Yes. When you set the trust up in 2016. The part about primary managing authority, you have sole authority, Walter. Sole. Not shared, not contingent. I wrote it that way for a reason, and you signed it in front of 2 witnesses because I made you. A pause. How are you doing? And I found I could not answer that question. So I said, send the December renewal terms in writing. Standard. No penalty, no increase. Exactly what any other tenant would get. You're not going to raise it? No, I said. I want him to see that I never took a dime more from him than I'd take from a stranger. That's going to hurt him worse than a rent increase ever could. On Wednesday, the phone started. I did not answer it. Not out of spite, I want to be careful here, because there was spite available to me, and I could feel it sitting in my chest like a hot coal, and every day I had to decide again not to pick it up. I didn't answer because I was 74 years old, and I did not yet trust my own voice. And a man who does not trust his own voice should keep his mouth shut. The calls came anyway, and on the 9th day, on a Monday morning in that hotel room, with the rain coming sideways off the harbor, I put my glasses on, and I listened to all 41 of them in order, from the first to the last, and I want to tell you what that was like. Because it was the hardest hour of the whole business, and it happened in complete silence, in a room nobody was watching. The first three were Saturday night. Dad, this is ridiculous. Call me back. Impatient. A man addressing an inconvenience. Sunday, four more. Dad, Sloane's upset. You embarrassed her in front of the Merricks. Then, look, I shouldn't have said what I said, but you know how you get. Monday, the first one, with something else underneath it. Dad, I got a letter from a lease company. Call me. Tuesday, 6 calls. Who is Prescott Cold Holdings? Not a question. A flat statement, like a man reading a road sign in a country whose language he doesn't speak. Wednesday, the tone changed, and it never changed back. Dad, is this did you how long? That one ran 40 seconds, and 11 of those seconds were nothing at all. Just a man breathing into a phone. Thursday, the bank pulled our practice line for review. They want an ownership letter from the landlord. Friday, 11:40 at night, and I could hear he'd had something to drink. You let me pay you 6 years. You sat at my table, and you let me pay you rent, and you never said one word. And then, quieter, and this is the one that took my legs out from under me. Is that what the schedule on the refrigerator was to you? Interest? Saturday, 3 calls, all of them hang-ups. Sunday, 1. Dad. Sloane's cousin came by. She's a nurse practitioner. She's asking me questions about you that I don't like the sound of. And Monday, 6:02 in the morning, the 41st. I don't know what I'm doing. Please pick up. I sat on the edge of that bed with the rain going, and I did not cry. Not then, but my hands were shaking hard enough that I had to set the phone down on the blanket. 41 calls. Somewhere in there, my son had stopped calling a bank and started calling his father, and I could not tell you exactly which call it happened on, and I have listened to them since, more than once, trying to find the seam. We are exactly halfway through this story, friend, and what happened in the next 2 weeks is the part I still have trouble saying out loud. Before I take you there, drop the number 74 in the comments right now. That's my age, so I know you're still riding along with me. Because what my son did next, I promise you, nobody sitting in this room saw coming. And a reminder, this story contains fictional elements shaped for drama and reflection, and some details won't match reality. If that's not what you're looking for tonight, this is a fine place to step away. No hard feelings at all. On the 29th of October, Ruth called me and told me my son and his wife had filed a petition in probate court seeking a conservatorship over the business affairs of Walter J. Prescott. I sat down when she said it. There was a chair right there, and I found it without looking. The petition alleged that I was 74 years old, recently widowed, living in a hotel, exhibiting confusion and impulsive financial behavior, and that my sudden and unexplained assumption of control over multiple commercial entities suggested I was being influenced or was no longer competent to manage them. It was supported by an affidavit from a nurse practitioner named Danielle Voss, Sloane's first cousin, who stated under oath that she had observed me on 3 occasions, appearing disoriented and repeating myself. I had met that woman twice in my life, both times at Christmas. Both times she'd asked me to move so she could get a picture. Walter, Ruth said, are you there? How bad is it? It's bad in the way lies are bad. It's not bad in the way facts are bad. She was already typing, I could hear her. Now listen to me. In January, you renewed your DOT medical certification. You didn't have to. You haven't driven commercially since 2016. You did it because you're a stubborn man who wants to be able to move a truck across his own yard if he feels like it. I had forgotten. I had genuinely forgotten. That's a full medical examiner's certification, Ruth said. January the 9th. Cognitive screening, reaction, vision, the whole battery at the occupational clinic on Sam Rittenberg, administered by a certified medical examiner, filed with the National Registry. 9 months before, your daughter-in-law's cousin swore you were disoriented. She stopped typing. Walter, you built the shield before anybody picked up the sword, and you did it by accident, because you didn't want to give up your CDL. I put my hand over my eyes. There's a second thing, Ruth said. The clinic does a functional assessment for commercial drivers over 70. 12 pages. You scored in the top decile for your age band. There's a note at the bottom from the examiner. Do you want to hear it? Yes, Mr. Prescott. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'd ride with you. I don't mind telling you that's where I broke. Not at the stool, not at the coats. At a line typed by a stranger at a clinic on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard in January, when I was still living in the back bedroom and doing Wednesday dry cleaning, the petition was dismissed on the 14th of November. The judge read the January certification, noted that the affiant had never conducted a clinical examination of me in any capacity, and dismissed it with prejudice. She also referred the affidavit to the state board for review of whether a licensed practitioner had sworn to a clinical observation she had no standing to make. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I walked out of that courthouse into a cold, bright Friday, and I felt like a man who has won a fight he never wanted to be in, which is to say, I felt tired all the way down to the bone. Marcus was in the hallway. We looked at each other for maybe 4 seconds. He'd lost weight. His collar was too big. Dad, not today, son, I said. And I walked past him, and I heard him say my name once more behind me, and I kept walking. And that is the single decision from all of this that I have questioned the most. 3 days later, the video came out. Dev, the young videographer, had shot the entire birthday party. Raw footage, 90 minutes of it. He had also not been paid, not for that job or for the 2 before it. And after 4 months of invoices, he sent Sloan a final notice. And when she replied that his work hadn't met the brand standard, he did what a 26-year-old with a hard drive and a grievance does. He cut 90 seconds and put it online. You could see the dining room. You could see the 20 gold cards. Then the camera swings toward the swinging door, which is open, and you can see straight through into the laundry room, and there is an old man in a gray jacket standing by a dryer with 20 coats in his arms. And you can hear it. You can hear all of it, because Dev had a lavalier mic clipped to a light stand 6 feet from that door. Either you apologize to Sloan and finish serving, or you're out of this house by morning. Ruth sent it to me on a Tuesday morning. I watched it sitting on the end of the hotel bed with my reading glasses on, and by the time I watched it a second time, it had been shared 4,000 times and seen by 83,000 people. 83,000 strangers. People in Ohio and Texas and places I will never see, who did not know my name or Roz's name or anything about 41 years of frozen freight, who watched 90 seconds and understood immediately that something wrong had happened in that house. Roz used to tell me that people know the truth when they see it, even when they can't put words to it. She said it so often it used to irritate me. Standing at that window over East Bay Street, I was ashamed of every time it had irritated me. By Thursday, 3 of Sloan's venue partners had quietly pulled her from their preferred vendor lists. Her December wedding, the big one, the one that was going to be her portfolio, moved to another planner. She posted a statement saying the clip was taken out of context and represented a private family matter misunderstood by strangers. The responses to that statement outnumbered everything else on her page 11-1. And on the 21st of November, Ruth called and said there was something I needed to come into the office and hear in person. What kind of something? The kind, she said carefully, that changes the story your son has been telling himself about who he is. She had a folder on the desk when I got there. Inside it was a loan file from 2020. Marcus's practice nearly went under in its 2nd year. I knew that much. I'd known it at the time. What I did not know, because I had asked never to be told, was how the rescue was documented. In the spring of 2020, his equipment financing was called. He needed $260,000 in 11 days, or he was going to lose the chairs, the imaging, all of it. I had called a man named Harold Boone, who I'd hauled for since 1983, and I had asked Harold to have his bank take another look at a young orthodontist on Rutledge Avenue, and I had personally guaranteed the note, and I had told Harold I remember saying it standing in my kitchen, he doesn't hear my name on this. The file had my signature on page 6. For 5.5 years, my son had believed he pulled his practice out of a hole by himself. He had told that story at dinner. I had heard him tell it at my own table, and I had nodded and I had said, "That's right, son." And I had felt something I'd call pride if I were being generous with myself, and cowardice if I were being accurate. Walter, Ruth said. He doesn't know. No. Do you want him to? I looked out her window at the church steeple you can see from that office, and I thought about a boy of 11 who broke a bicycle in a temper and had a new one in the garage the following Saturday. And a young man of 22 who put a car into a ditch on Folly Road and never once, not for a single day, went without a car. And I understood, finally and completely, sitting in a lawyer's office at 74, that the schedule on the refrigerator did not come out of nowhere. Somebody taught that boy that things arrive. I had 38 years of practice at making things arrive silently, and then I was surprised when he stopped looking for where they came from. Yes, I said. He needs to know, not to punish him, because a man cannot build one true thing on a foundation he doesn't know is borrowed. Ruth nodded. When? Now. All of it. The lease, the note, the January certification, the schedule on the refrigerator, every page. And Ruth, I stopped at the door. I want to do it in a room with a table, not a courthouse. We met on the 6th of December at a coffee shop on Cumming Street with steamed-up windows and a floor that hasn't been level since the Depression. He was there before me. He stood up when I came in, which he had not done for me in 15 years. I put the folder on the table, and I walked him through it, item by item, in order, in the flat voice I use for numbers. The building, 6 years of rent, the renewal at standard terms, then the January certification and the 12-page assessment, and the line from the examiner. Then Harold Boone. Then page 6. He did not interrupt one time. When he got to my signature, he stopped. He put his finger on it, the way you'd touch something to check that it's real, and his whole face came apart. I have seen men cry. I saw my own father cry twice, but I had never in 40 years seen my son make that sound, and I hope I never do again. It came up out of him broken, with no shape to it, and his shoulders went forward and he put both hands over his face right there in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning with the espresso machine going behind us. I did not reach across the table. I let it happen, because it needed to happen, and because there is no shortcut through a man meeting himself for the first time. When he came up out of it, his eyes were swollen and his voice was wrecked. I told people that story, he said, about the practice. I told it at your table. I know. Why didn't you tell me? And then, before I could answer, he said the thing I had been waiting 3 decades to hear him say without knowing I was waiting. What happened to me, Dad? My throat closed up so completely I could not speak for a moment. And then I reached over and put my hand on top of his, on that table, and his hand turned over and gripped mine hard, a boy's grip in a 40-year-old man's hand. And I said the truest thing I have ever said in my life. I did, I said. I opened every door for you instead of teaching you how to knock. And then I got quiet, and I stayed quiet for 2 years and 7 months in a house I paid the taxes on. And that quiet son, that was mine. That belongs to me, not to Sloan and not to you. We sat there a long time. Outside, Charleston went on with its Saturday without us. 9 days later, Ruth read the new instruments out loud in her conference room with Marcus sitting across from me. I want to be very clear with you about this part, friend, because I've heard the objection, and it's a fair one. I did not give my money away while I still needed it. I'm 74, not a saint. The trust pays me first, for as long as I'm above ground, out of the income from the Rutledge property and the cold storage on Meeting Street Road. Every dollar I need, my whole life, comes first. What I did was decide where it goes when I'm done needing it. When I'm done, the remainder funds, the Rosalind Prescott Fund, nursing scholarships at the technical college, 2 a year, full ride, for people going back to school after 40. My wife took her boards at 43 with a 9-year-old and a husband on the road. Nobody helped her. Somebody's going to get helped in her name now. The Trad Street house goes on the market in March, and I told Marcus to his face why. Not to punish him. Because a house is not a monument and Roz never cared about it. She cared about what happened inside it, and what had been happening inside it lately wasn't worth preserving. He can buy it at appraisal like anybody else if he wants it. He is not getting it handed to him again. That was the whole disease. And Marcus gets nothing automatic. Not $1. What he got was a piece of paper, a 5-year agreement, notarized, that he repays the $260,000 into the fund at $200 a week, not to me, to the fund, and that he shows up. Not usefully. Not to fix anything. Just present, once a week, for 5 years. If he stops, it ends, and it does not restart. He signed it with his hand shaking. "Is this forgiveness?" he asked me. "No," I told him. "This is a payment plan on it." He filed for divorce in February. I didn't ask him to, and I never said one word about that woman to him, before or after. He told me on the porch of my new place, a little brick house on James Island with a yard I can mow in 20 minutes, and all I said was, "That's a hard road, son," and I let him sit there as long as he needed to. He's made 109 payments now, $200 a week. He shows up Thursdays. Sometimes we don't talk about anything at all. Last month I gave him the only thing from that whole year I actually put thought into: a paper bag, folded over at the top. Inside was a pair of my old work gloves, the leather ones, patched at the right thumb with a piece of a shop rag in 1994 because I was too cheap to buy new ones, and Roz sewed the patch on at the kitchen table while she told me I was ridiculous. Worth nothing, maybe $11 new. He opened the bag and looked at them for a long time, and then he put his head down. "You always said you drove a truck," he said. "I did drive a truck," I said. "I just didn't only drive one. And that was my fault too. A man shouldn't make his own son guess what he does all day." Now, friend, I'm going to tell you the 4 things I'd say to myself if I could go back and stand in that kitchen in 1996. And I want you to take whichever one fits your house. Live near your children. Do not live inside their marriage. There's a distance that keeps love clean, and I found it about 3 years too late. If somebody hands you a list with your name in every row, say something the first week, not the second year. The cost of being agreeable compounds like interest, and by the time you notice it, you can't afford the balance. Do not let the people you love mistake your silence for consent. Roz used to say the oldest person at the table eats first, not as a courtesy, but as an order of operations, so everybody remembers what the table was built on. I let my family forget the order of operations, and I let them because it was easier than a hard conversation. And this one costs the most. Making things arrive for your children without letting them see the work is not generosity. It's a slow theft. You're taking the thing that would have made them strong, and you're keeping it, and you're calling it love. I'm not the hero of this. I was a father who loved his son in every wrong way available to a man and a few he had to invent. But I'll tell you what I believe. I believe an honest man does not permanently lose what he has actually earned. It just comes back to him through a different door than the one he was watching. And real family justice does not happen in a courtroom or a bank. It happens the moment somebody finally says the true thing out loud, however late it is, and however much it costs. Because standing up straight is not something you do in private. It's something you declare clearly, and early, and before the price of your silence gets too high to pay. So, tell me, and I mean this, did my son deserve a second chance? Some of you are going to say I was too soft. Some of you are going to say I was too hard on him about that house. I want to hear it either way. Drop it in the comments below and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you, truly, for staying with an old man all the way to the last word. That means more to me than you know. One note before you go. The stories here contain fictional elements shaped purely for storytelling and reflection. If that's not what you're looking for right now, that's perfectly all right. You choose what serves you. I'll be here whenever you're ready.